Welcome, everybody. Welcome back to Barely Filtered. I am so excited today to have on somebody that I've been fangirling for quite some time. I found her through the interwebs. I asked her to come on my podcast. She actually said yes. So here she is. Her name is Maisie Hill, and she is a renowned menstrual health expert, acupuncturist, and author of best-selling book, Period Power, Harness Your Hormones and Get Your Cycle Working for You. She has over 15 years experience in women's health, and she combines her knowledge of Chinese medicine, hormone health, and holistic therapies to empower women to understand and embrace their menstrual cycles. So thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
I'm sure that my short bio doesn't cover all of the work that you've done, because just the book Period Power blew my mind. I wasn't aware of almost anything in that book. And as a woman, like with a vagina and a hormone cycle, I feel like I should have known that. Like, what's up with that?
I know. Well, I think that's such a common experience. And that's why I really felt such a compelling urge to write the book in the first place, is because it's just all the stuff that we should have been taught in school, should have been raised with. Like really valuable information about our bodies and ways to understand ourselves, ways to support ourselves. And there's just such a glaring absence of that. And I do think that's now changing, because that was my first book and it came out 2019, so like 5 years ago. But the commonality with all of them is this is just the stuff that is information that we need to have about our bodies, whether it's understanding our stress responses, understanding the hormones of the menstrual cycle, the hormonal transition that goes on during perimenopause. This is all just information that we have a right to know about ourselves. And when we do have that information, it's really powerful, because it means we can, first of all, stop judging and shaming ourselves. Mm-hmm. And we can make really powerful decisions about our lives, whether it's what's going on with us internally or how we see ourselves, how we participate in the world. So having that information is really essential. And I'm just really up for ensuring that people have that information. Yes. So I'm glad that you found it.
Yeah, because, I feel like I, like many women, kind of feel shame sometimes about not being on that 24-hour cycle clock that men are on, where we're supposed to be the same person every single day with the same energy levels, fasting and eating the same way and exercising the same way, and having that monotony and routine and structure. But we're not meant to be that way.
I know, but do you even know men who are like that? I mean,
not really. Yeah, but it's easier for them.
But this is where we have to watch ourselves, because sometimes we just talk about that like it's fact. Yeah. And actually the hormonal cycles and female hormones, that's way more predictable when you actually look at the science. Yeah. And so, but we talk about, men are always the same. They're quote unquote the stable ones.
Yeah. Are they?
I think we have to watch how we describe that, because I think we kind of screw ourselves over when we talk about it like that.
Yeah, that you're not wrong. All the talk about, well, should a woman be pregnant? They get PMS, and who knows, they're going to be too emotional. And
I know they're going to be nuking countries just because of the rage that they feel.
100%.
But this is, to your point, I think it is this idea of being stable or being the same, or some kind of consistency, right? That's what we're talking about. And actually, once you start tracking your menstrual cycle, once you start understanding how your particular experience is, that does become pretty predictable. But, the things that have us kind of on let's talk about, the PMS and the rage and anxiety and things like that. Mm-hmm. There's multiple reasons for that. That's a very nuanced conversation.
Yeah.
But a lot of that, right, going to the kind of extremes of that, is to do with the unpaid labor that we do. It's to do with the emotional labor that we do, the taking care of everyone, the feeling like that's what we need to be doing, that's what we should be doing. And if we're not in that nurturing, caring role for everyone in our lives, including complete strangers, then that means something really negative about us.
Right.
And so that's what my latest book, Powerful, is really all about is kind of overcoming all of those socialized things in us so that you can be the person that you actually are and do the things you want to do.
I love that. I love that. And I want to read this quote because it really struck me. I think in our culture also, along with being the caretakers, we kind of expire women at earlier than men. It's like when they start to turn gray or, their period stops, then it's like, well, now they're of no use to society because their whole use was just to, procreate. So now we can just set them aside. They're not attractive anymore. And there was a quote in your book that said, during her first bleeding, a woman meets her power. During her bleeding years, she practices it. At menopause, she becomes it. And this is from a traditional Native American saying. And I love that because it's just totally not what we were taught. And I love the idea of the fact that like menopause, I become my power. That's amazing. I have something to look forward to.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, totally. So I'm 43. So I'm like teetering my way into that perimenopausal stage. And actually that transition even begins at 35, like the gradual transition towards perimenopause. And then menopause is when your periods have actually stopped for a full year. And then that one day marks menopause when you haven't had a period for a full calendar year. And then you're postmenopausal, right? So there's this transition going on before. And I very much feel that I'm in that, where I have done so much work on myself, but also just with maturity, age, experience, just don't give a shit anymore about what other people think about me. And like the freedom that comes with that is just so powerful. But we don't talk about that. We talk about, oh, well, you get old and then you're past it. And like this whole ridiculous narrative that we're fed that older women are just competing with younger women.
Right. And that they're not having I feel like in my head, I always equated like menopause means you're not having sex anymore. I don't know.
Isn't that fascinating? Yeah. Where do we get this from? And like, but it's a really good question to ask. Where do we get this from and who does it serve? Right. That's the narrative that we are fed. And actually, with the change in hormonal landscape that goes on during perimenopause, there might be stages of that where a woman will have less sexual desire. They might have an increase in sexual desire as well. Right. But there's also hormonal support that you can take that's going to help with that. And, there's also the freedom that comes with like being postmenopausal, knowing that you're not going to conceive.
That's kind of nice. Not going to lie.
Yeah.
Sounds pretty good.
And, it can be changes. Someone could have been taking hormonal birth control for most of their reproductive lifespan and then stop taking it and actually experience a resurgence of sexual desire. So there's so many changes that go on there. And I don't think it's this idea that we can fit women into like one size fits all category of like, this is the female experience. That's it. Package it up neatly.
Okay, what would you tell somebody who, like me, had no idea that, first of all, our monthly cycle has 4 phases, and Maisy talks about them in this wonderful way of like the 4 seasons. What would you tell somebody who is saying like, I don't know even where to start with, I don't know where my fall is, where my winter is, where my spring is. How do we start?
The simple way is you just start tracking. And people overcomplicate this. So I'm going to spell it out for everyone that's listening. Okay. So the easiest way you can do it is either like use the notes app on your phone or just get a little notebook and just keep track every day of just how you're feeling. That can be physically, like having energy. It could be having headaches or like particular symptoms related to your cycle. It could be that you feel more confident. It could be that you feel anxious. It could be that you're feeling like flirtatious and a bit sassy and kind of up for taking risks. It could be that you just kind of want to hang out at home or like connect with the people that you're close to. So there's so many variations there. But if you just literally a few words is all you need to do. And as you said, in the book, there's a chapter on each of the different phases. And you just start to get a sense of, oh, when I'm in my inner winter, which equates to the time in and around menstruation, when you have your period, this is how I tend to feel like. And then when I'm in my spring, which is after your period ends and as you get closer to ovulation, this is how I tend to feel. And like, these are the things that I struggle with a bit then. And then ovulation is your inner summer. This is what I tend to feel up for. These are the changes in myself that I notice. And then fall, which is what we call autumn over here in the UK. This is what tends to go on for me. And it's not like a rigid framework that you have to stick to. Okay. So I like to think about it as just like the weather forecast. You know, it's reasonably accurate. It gives you a good sense of things. It's going to vary a little bit. But just because rain is forecast, especially if you live in the UK, it doesn't mean that you have to stay indoors all the time, right? There might be times when you cancel your plans, when you're like, you know what? This is one of those days where I'm just not really feeling up for being all that social. But most of the time, you just have to like stick on a raincoat or take an umbrella out and get on with your day. So that's what this is about. It's about, aligning your life to your cycle somewhat. But also it's just like feeling equipped to go about your daily life, having a sense of what's going on.
Right.
And I think the best example I can give you of this is typically around ovulation with the cocktail of hormones that's going on. We tend to feel really energetic, really confident, really social, just really up for it. Post-ovulation, like literally the next day, you might have a bit of a dip. Not everyone does, but you might have a bit of a dip where you'll lose that confidence, where inner doubt creeps in. And then you're like, oh my good gosh, why did I say yes to that thing yesterday?
Yeah. Just from one day to the next, literally that quickly. Oh, yeah.
But without this information, what happens is we judge ourselves.
Yeah.
Oh, why? I really made a mistake then. I shouldn't have done that. Why am I like this? And we like catastrophize about it all. Instead of just being like, oh, it's a hormonal dip. I'm going to feel different in a couple of days' time.
I do. That I think you summed it up, was one of my biggest and most helpful takeaways from reading your book, was that nothing is going to last forever. I think when we're in it and we're not really sure where it's coming from and we don't know that it's our hormones, we're like, this is just me. I'm just like a cranky person, or I'm just stressed out all the time. And we don't really even remember that just a few weeks ago, we didn't feel that way. Or we don't even remember that a few days ago, we didn't feel that way. I don't know why it is that we're so quick to forget that we're not always in a bad mood. When we're in a bad mood, we're just like, oh, I'm always in this just all the time. And then when I learned that, you know, it is just the hormones, the cycle's not going to last forever. And it's not me, it's my hormones. I don't have to identify with the way I'm feeling right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it is challenging, especially if you're in like the premenstrual doom.
Which I feel like the premenstrual doom does last longer than the good phases, though. Am I just imagining that? I don't know.
Well, our brains do this thing. So there's a whole section in my new book about this, in terms of like, there's this thing called cognitive distortions, where we have this kind of negative pattern of thinking that isn't based on anything factual. Our brains are just paying attention to certain things. Yeah. So we can catastrophize, we focus on the negative, we get very black and white about everything. And so our brains just have this natural tendency to focus on the negative. And especially if you're already in what is subjectively and objectively a more challenging experience, then we are just more primed to see the negative things.
100%.
But that can actually be really useful, right? Because if you think about how for a lot of the menstrual cycle, we've got estrogen making us feel really lovely, right? And making us feel really good about life. And, oh, isn't that guy really cute? Isn't that person really interesting? And like, estrogen makes us like very accommodating towards others, right? Because estrogen's aim is for us to find a mate, have sex, and get knocked up.
Okay.
Right? Whether we want to or not. That's the name of the game, right? That's what the menstrual cycle is all about.
Right.
So it's not useful to us when we're in that fertile phase of the cycle to be focusing on like a potential mate's negative traits, or like the pile of stuff at the bottom of the stairs, or the dishes that haven't been put away, and all of those things. But then when we're in that premenstrual phase, and there's a different hormonal picture going on, we start to actually notice the things that we're not happy with in our lives.
Right.
And the things that do need to change. And again, we can kind of screw ourselves over here by thinking, oh, I'm just premenstrual. Oh, I'm just this. It's like, yeah, but is that something you actually want to change? That thing that you're pissed off about, the thing that you're angry about, is that something that you would like to change in your life?
Right.
And so, you know, a lot of period power is about trying to unpick that and give people support to be able to do that. But I think it's also kind of what ultimately led to the new book, Powerful, because I realized it just wasn't, as much as there was in period power, it wasn't sufficient. People needed more tools to be able to navigate those challenging situations and be like, you know what? I'm unhappy with this thing, but how do I have a conversation with this person about the thing that I want to change?
Yeah, because once again, we want to be accommodating. We want to take care of people. We want people to like us. And I definitely feel that different times of the month I'm more that way. And then I make a plan or I sign up for something. And then later on, I'm just like, why? Who was that person? That was not me.
It comes back to bite you. It comes back
totally
to bite
does.
you. So I think, having awareness of your cycle and what's coming up is really useful, because you can be like, well, this version of me today wants to say yes to this, but what version of me is going to have to fulfill this thing that I'm committing to?
Is there some kind of, I know people talk about seed cycling or different like supplements that you can take. Is there anything that you recommend for somebody who feels like this, that I've tried to deep dive this information? There is a lot. And I feel like I wish there was just this one size fits all supplement that we could take all month that would balance the hormones. Is there any kind of easy advice you would give to somebody who maybe wants to start seed cycling or intertwine some kind of supplements or something into their diet?
Yeah. So this is slightly, okay. There are lots of things. You're right. There's so many different forms of nutritional support that can come in, and they are really important. But I would say the most universal thing, that if I could offer it in the form of a supplement to everyone that's listening, is to just say no more often.
I love that. I thought you were going to say don't drink coffee or don't drink alcohol or like all like the normal things. I think I could do that one. No, I know. I interviewed a different woman, also a hormone specialist, but she was like, she's like, I had to give up coffee. It was really throwing off my hormones. And for me personally, I do know that alcohol makes my cycle so much worse, just in terms of the acne that I'll get, the PMS that I'll get, painful periods. If I don't drink, because sometimes I'll do like a 6-month stint, no alcohol, or 3 months, and really my hormones do balance. And so I know that wine is not good for me.
All of these things.
So
and, I think in period power, there are so many suggestions depending on what kind of hormonal imbalance that you're looking at, and, various strategies there. And the idea with that, I will say for anyone who has the book, is not that you do all of these things. Like, you don't have to like do 30 of the 30 ideas that are in there. The idea is like you cherry pick things and give them a go and see what works. And I agree with you. That kind of stuff is really important. It does make a difference. It's made a huge difference to me, because I used to have debilitating period pain. That's what got me into this in the first place, was trying to navigate my own experience, trying to heal that period pain. So I know nutrition and food and all those things have made a difference, and they have to my clients as well. But when you look at the cycle holistically and caring for yourself throughout the cycle and the amount of stuff that women do, I just say no more often and see what happens.
Okay, you heard it here. Doctor's orders, everybody. Just say no. Just say no more often. I'm going to practice that today. It like even just coming off of this vacation I was telling you about, 4 weeks with my parents, and it's because I want my kids to be able to spend more time with my parents, and like I'm always feeling guilty. As moms, we're always feeling guilty about our kids and about like you want to keep everybody happy, but it's like maybe 4 weeks with my parents was not what was good for me.
I've got news for you. Mum guilt, I know we like accept it as the truth. Mum guilt is completely optional.
Oh, Yes, I'm starting to be like, it's not cute anymore. No more mom guilt for me. I'm over it. I want to be a happy mom, like one that chooses herself too.
Yeah, I mean, because the thing is, what we end up doing is we end up deprioritizing ourselves, prioritizing the needs of other people. And actually, in that, we are usually being overly responsible for the other people in our lives and trying to take care and manage them. Often, like, because we want everyone to have a good time. We want, you know, in your example, grandparents to have a relationship with their grandkids and, you know, to have that time together. And that matters. Of course it does. But what's your experience of that? How does that affect your relationship with your kids and with your parents? And so, you know, often we're being overly responsible because we're trying to manage other people in order to feel okay in ourselves and to feel safe in ourselves, rather than, say, letting some conflict happen between family members or letting them figure it out. We're often just like swooping in, stepping in, trying to take care of everyone. So again, doctor's orders for everyone listening. If you can just like sit on your hands, keep your mouth shut, and let other people sort themselves out, that is incredibly liberating.
Oh my gosh, I can't wait to.
It's uncomfortable often in the moment, but you save yourself so much time and energy and mental bandwidth by just letting the other people get on with their lives.
I love it. I'm going to be doing more of that. Let's talk a little bit more about, I know a lot of my listeners are entering menopause or thinking towards menopause. Is there a certain age we should be preparing for it? Or I don't know. Should I be thinking about it?
Well, I think for sure 35 and up, thinking about it.
Okay.
Not necessarily because you're going to start having perimenopausal symptoms at that age, although some women do. But I think more so just knowing what's around the corner, because it means you can start doing things now that are going to support you once you are in that transition.
Okay. And then is it better on the other side without having these 4 cycles the cycle of these 4 seasons?
For some people it is. I think for some people there's like profound relief. Thank goodness that is done. You know, particularly people who've like really suffered for decades through their experience of their cycle. There's great relief there. But sometimes even for those people, there's the grieving of the loss of that. Yeah. And, you know, sometimes that can be directly related to the potential to have children, whether or not you didn't, wanted to, you know, that whole bundle of thoughts. But it can also just be about the experience of the cycle and just missing that. But, you know, some people are like, yeah, I do. It was nice. I do kind of miss that. But also, isn't it fantastic to be here on this side of it?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. For every season, you know, there's something wonderful that you can take from it. Right. So I think that's just what a lesson in like enjoying the present moment, because it's not always going to be the same, just like any cycle. So Powerful, does Powerful, your newer book, speak more to menopause, or is it more about the different cycles or the different phases and how to navigate them?
Well, it's more in consideration of like so many women I speak to talk about the freedom that comes of being on the other side of menopause, and just the freedom for like not caring what people think about them anymore and just like making bold moves in their lives. And like, well, that's all well and good that happens then, but what if we can accelerate the process and people get those skills even before they're anywhere near perimenopause?
Right. Yeah.
And then you're equipped for that experience. So Powerful is really reflective of my life coaching practice and the membership that I have. So each chapter, it has a different topic, like people pleasing, boundaries, having hard conversations, responsibility without being over responsible, but really through the lens of what's going on with stress responses and how they impact your ability to do these things. So it's really just a guide to life, but it's going to work well with understanding of the menstrual cycle and help prepare you for what's going to come later on in life, so that it's less of a bumpy ride for you.
I love that. And I love how you're kind of intersecting hormone health with just basic living health, because I mean, kind of our hormones are our personality in a way, right? How can we be like, oh, I don't know. So I feel like I've always been like, I'm super ADHD. I can't focus on one thing. But then I realize it's actually directly related to my hormones. And then I'm more ADHD during my ovulatory phase.
Oh, yeah. Interesting. Yeah. I'm autistic, but it is interesting, like the intersection for me, because I mean, there's so many links between like neurodiversity, neurospiciness, and what's going on.
Is neurospiciness a technical term?
Yeah. Well, it's often preferred by people in the autistic and ADHD community, so I like to bring it in sometimes. But it's, there's so many relationships that are going on there. But I think often, people who are late diagnosed, like myself, I found out when I was 39. And often it is that, we've had our own kids. Our kids are perhaps neurodiverse.
Yes.
Going through that assessment process, starting to think, oh, wait a minute, these are things that are there for me. And so a lot of women are having that experience, but it's also happening at the same time as they're going through perimenopause and starting to. And so there's this like amplification of how their ADHD shows up or how autism is there in their lives. And for sure, like for me, the sensory experience of being autistic, because I'm very sensory sensitive, and that premenstrual phase where it's like autism strikes, but then around ovulation, I'll be like, maybe that psychiatrist got it wrong, because like, I'm making eye contact with people. I'm making people laugh. Like, I'm really social. Like, he definitely got that wrong. And then like a week later, I'm like, oh no, he got that right.
Yes. I relate to that so much, because I feel like I've struggled with that my whole life, of just being like, am I ADHD? I felt like this week, I don't think I am. Last week, I think I was. Or even just like having those really, like the feelings of anxiety and depression that can come with hard PMS symptoms, and then being like, do I need to go on something? Do I have depression? And then you feel better the next week, and everything's fine again. And doctors are so quick to prescribe something like an SSRI or something, even stronger in the moment. And I just feel like it's such a missed opportunity when we haven't been able to learn about how we can work with our hormones. And I've been kind of playing with seed cycling a little bit, and that's been really interesting. Like, I swear pumpkin seeds alone helped my cystic acne.
Wow.
Which is,
that makes sense.
It's just crazy, because I'm like, before I was on antibiotics and birth control, it's like I should have just been eating pumpkin seeds. It's crazy. But
there is a big relationship between, particularly something like premenstrual dysphoric disorder, which is like often described as like the extreme form of PMS, which I think is putting it mildly. But there are so many people with PMDD who are also ADHD, also autistic, having, really challenging experiences in that second phase of the cycle, in the run up to their period starting. And so I hope that in the future that, that we bring the cycle into how we take care of ourselves when we have these other factors going on, whether it's someone with like generalized anxiety disorder or ADHD, and that we think about perhaps changing how we use medication or how we use supplements and things in consideration of what's going on with the cycle. Because, I've had ADHD clients who need to take more of their medication in that luteal phase, but then at other times they need it a bit less.
That makes sense.
But again, it's this idea, we need to be the same every day, take the medication the same every day, and just essentially be machines instead of humans.
Right. So, and I just want to touch on your last book before we wrap up, because I feel like I still don't really know like what I'm supposed to be expecting with perimenopause or menopause. Is it like PMS, but just a whole like year of it? Or what do it seems horrible. Should I be scared?
Well, so I'll tell you where I'm at, because I'm at that beginning of, of things beginning to change. So it's not that there are distinct phases during perimenopause. It's a bit of a wild ride. But for me, what happens usually in the early phases, the very, very early phases of heading towards perimenopause, is your cycle might start to vary in length a little bit. So mine went from being 28 days to sometimes 22, sometimes 24, sometimes 26. So just a bit of shortening. And then I would get kind of what we typically think of as perimenopausal symptoms around the time my period was due. So in the days running up to it, I would have insomnia, some night sweats, some kind of anxiety and doom coming in, like really sensory sensitive, really just needing to be alone. And that's so much, I think, of the perimenopause experience. But I would just kind of get it around, need to sleep with my feet outside of the comforter and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, that's kind of a sign like, oh, maybe the hormones are starting to shift. And then, we often think about perimenopause as a time of hormone deficiency, which is, we do have lowered hormones during certain phases of that and certainly post-menopause. But it can actually be a time where our hormones are relatively high. But it's all about the relationship between the hormones. So you can have a huge increase in estrogen, but not much progesterone to kind of act as a seesaw and keep things balanced. So you can get symptoms of high estrogen, low progesterone, but then you might go on to have symptoms of low estrogen. So, there's variation there, but this is all happening over the space.
So how are you going to balance it? If it's like one day, if this is too high and you're trying to figure, it's like whack-a-mole.
But this is where I think having a good foundation before you even get to this point is really useful, because the women that I see who are really struggling in perimenopause are the ones who haven't addressed things like boundaries in their lives, who are so over responsible for everyone, who are people pleasing all the time, struggling to make decisions because they're just making so many decisions over the course of the day.
Yeah.
But if you address all of these things, which the new book can help you with, then it means that by the time you are going into perimenopause, you have these skills already. Then there's less to figure out. You have a really strong sense of self. You're being really powerful in your own life. And then maybe it's a bit of, adjusting how you work out.
Right.
Maybe it's a bit of this supplement. Maybe it's hormonal support.
Right. So are you saying that making these active decisions in your life to take on less responsibility, to say no, to make better choices can directly affect your hormones, or maybe just not make you feel as overwhelmed by them?
Both.
Oh.
For sure, both. If you just think about like how ongoing sustained stress, what that does to all the other hormones, it's huge. You know, the impacts of cortisol and adrenaline, that fundamentally they're going to impact your experience of the menstrual cycle and perimenopause.
Oh, that makes sense.
So, they literally fight for receptor sites. The hormones, they block the progesterone receptor sites. So even if you have progesterone going around, your stress hormones are blocking them up so that you can't actually have the benefit of them.
Oh, that makes sense. Okay, now I'm kind of seeing why maybe people who coffee makes them stressed, or high cortisol, high adrenaline, maybe I could see how that would mess up the hormones.
Yeah.
Got it.
But it also means, if you are getting better at making decisions in your life and things, and trusting yourself, having your own back, being kind to yourself and having that respectful relationship with yourself, it means that when you are going through these shifts in life, and I would say hormonal shifts, but also just challenging times in life, challenging seasons, being practiced in these skills is going to make those times easier.
Okay. Yeah.
Doesn't mean it's going to be take away all the challenge of it. But if that fundamental solid relationship with yourself is there, you already feel like you're the expert in your own life, then that's going to give you a certain level of buoyancy on the waves rather than feeling like you're drowning the whole time.
Makes sense. And if it's too noisy around you too, you're not really tuning in or even hearing what your own needs are. I think that's something that I've really noticed. And that, I think, is why meditation is so helpful for so many people, because it's just, a time when you're actually able to listen to your own body. And I think we don't really put a lot of conscious effort towards that.
No. And we're also, through our socialization, we're first of all, like always, we're literally trained to think of other people. How can we keep that person happy? What would, just all this taking care of everyone. But we're also kind of socialized to look outside of ourselves for solutions and opinions. So we're always like, well, what do you think I should do here? Rather than thinking, well, what do I want to do here?
Right.
And how do I make that happen?
That's so true. Ah, my gosh. I wish that we could keep talking forever, but I know that I'm getting the eye to wrap it up right now. But thank you so much. And I know that my listeners are going to go find your books. And I found you on Audible, which I loved because her voice is so soothing and she has that awesome accent. So I feel like I already knew you from listening to you. Are your other books on Audible too?
They're all on there. So there's Period Power, Perimenopause Power, and Powerful.
Okay, amazing. And then can we find you on Instagram or anywhere?
You can. Okay. Yeah, I'm _Maisie Hill _ and then my podcast is called The Maisie Hill Experience.
Yay. Thank you so much for talking with me today. I'm blown away by all the insight that you have shared, and we're so lucky to be the recipients of it.
Thanks for having me. I have loved this conversation and agree we could have gone off on so many tangents.
I know.
I think we did a good job of reining ourselves in.
We did. I know. And I try not to make it too personal. The other woman I talked to about hormones, she was like, maybe we can talk at a later date about your personal issues. And I'm like, no. This is my podcast. I want to tell you about my periods. Oh my God. But anyway, thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye.